to talk about the materials of construction. As a designer, I have to put that in the context of the materials of design. And I start with history. It's been said that if you want to look far into the future, first look far into the past. So history, which is inseparable from the place. If I talk about sustainability, then it's inseparable from nature, working with nature. As a designer, subjectively, I've always felt that a building would be healthier if you had fresh air, if it related to the sun, to views. As I'll show later, that's now being scientifically proven. It's inseparable, sustainability, from energy, the consumption of energy and the harvesting of energy. And in an ideal economy, whether that is of a city or a building, it's inseparable from the process of recycling. And materials, again, as a designer, I may want to dematerialize the material. I may want it to evaporate, to disappear, or I may want it to have solidity. So these are the themes that weave through a small selection of projects, mostly from the last decade. History, if I think about my first meeting with Steve Jobs, he was talking about Silicon Valley and how it was the fruit bowl of America in his youth. And in that first meeting, we talked about the possibility of recreating that landscape, not as the setting for a building, but really the project itself. So the challenge is, how do you transform this kind of urbanity, and the site, which has 24 buildings, is mostly tarmac, how superimposing a building on that and creating a landscape, transforming tarmac into greenery, planting 10,000 trees, and creating a creative environment for 12,000 people. What is interesting here on this something like 70-hectare site is that the view from above is very, very different from the reality on the ground. So that is a 1.5 kilometer circle, it's half a kilometer across. But when you're in that space, it's very, very much about the landscape. The building evaporates almost into the background. And outside of that inner circle, that inner sanctum, the heart, the social heart of this community, again, the building is very much an incident in the landscape. I talked about recycling. Here, 100% of those 24 buildings which occupied the site has been recycled into the concrete for the foundation of the building. Those 10,000 trees absorb something like 200 tons of carbon dioxide annually, and 90% of this construction, all of everything remained on site, so nothing would go into a landfill. The construction is very much about doing more with less. So the individual elements which comprise the construction form concrete which is polished like marble, a noble material out of something which is inherently very basic. It's more than just the structure. The small bore pipes embedded in it which connect together act as a cold or warm radiator. And that exploration of composite materials goes back to a very modest factory in the 1960s, which had these small bore pipes embedded in the concrete. This project, in terms of its materials, generated 3 new factories. One in China, one in Germany, and creating a new source, part of the economy in California itself. This is one of the factories and one of the eyebrows which act to, as a kind of shade, but also deflecting the views and light deep into the inner spaces. And here pushing the technology of glass to a new level, something like 15 by 3 meter sheets, and 8 kilometers of glass around, but literally dematerializing, bringing that landscape deep into the work areas themselves. Another project on the site is the Steve Jobs Theatre, which is a disc of some 70 tons of carbon fiber, which hovers in the landscape. This is the entrance to the theatre below. And that's comprised of a kind of technology transfer from the boat industry into the world of building. And here, the challenge was, how do you dematerialize the support for this roof? And this small film clip shows the 70-odd tons of that roof being now moved onto a perimeter of glass. So there is no visible structure. The structure is that ring of glass, which totally dematerializes. Below that, the entrance to the theatre is very much about the materiality, the very substance, the sculpture of stone, and coming down to the detail of how you end a staircase, turn a corner. And again, a reminder of the exterior of the main building and the way in which it works with nature. Here, the kind of blossoms of Steve Jobs' youth blooming in the foreground, and how you pull fresh air into the building through the junction at the top of the glass. A reminder that a lot of the things that I said earlier, that when I started designing with colleagues, very subjectively, I felt views and ventilation were important. That's now being scientifically demonstrated, and the most recent study of 2016 by the Harvard School of Public Health, and this is just a glimpse of an experiment that they did, and the test cubicles were above a machine room, and the machine room would simulate the environment of a standard conventional building, meeting building codes, and a green building and a super green building. And this is a kind of summary of the findings, but quite interesting to see the brown there of a conventional building, the light green, the super green building, like the buildings that I'm describing, and the performance of the individuals in terms of responding to crises, demonstrating strategies, absorbing and using information. So that theme of working with nature, the breathing building, also recurs in a very different context, the middle of a historic city, for the headquarters of Bloomberg. And here the facades, which are bronze set in stone, are the gills of the building. So each of those, well, half of them to be precise, are filtering the air, filtering out the noise, and contributing to the environment, reducing the energy load, because for something like, in most temperate climates, for 70% of the time, you don't need expensive cooling and heating. And even here today, buildings could, in today's conditions, function without that huge energy input. But importantly, it's also very much about wellness. And here the decisions on materials, my theme of history, we have the Wren Church on the left, the 18th century, the 17th century, and the Magistrates' Court on the right. And it was those stones, to be good neighbours, that determined the materials of the building, local stone. And the very form of the building itself, which is cut through with an internal arcade, is again a response to history, because if you look at the the site of the building outlined there in red on an old map, then there is the line of Watling Street, which was the original Roman road. And this new development, which takes away the earlier buildings, recreates that line of the Roman road, Watling Street. It bisects the development. And if we look at this building to examine it internally, its materiality, how it functions, imagine that yellow line is a cut through the building, it's a cross-section. We look at that cross-section, and here you can see the way in which it breathes. And its very heart is about natural light, it's about the pedestrian movement of a spiral, it's coming to the light. So the ecology of the building, its sustainability, is embedded in the circulation route. The next few images will take you from the ground up to the 7th floor, which is the social heart of the building. So everybody goes there, they move out from there to their workplace. So it is the gathering space, this is the vortex at the entrance. You move up to the pantry, the focus is on St. Paul's, and here you have the pantry space, and in the background you can see the bronze spiral. The materiality of the building is the same outside as inside, very much inspired by 19th century buildings in that respect. You move up to the light, that's the circulation. If you look down on the workspaces, then you see that the floor is wood. This is very unusual in an office environment because you imagine it's not possible acoustically, but it is the ceiling which is making that possible. And here, inventing a composite which is combining the wood with a magnetic layer so that it's removable for an access floor. And this ceiling of 2.5 million petals, and each one of those petals is working not only acoustically, but 1 in every 5 has an LED light source, and the whole assembly goes hot or cold according to the weather conditions. So the air which is pulled over that is modifying the climate of the building. In that sense, it's a very holistic approach, and the project also uses aircraft technology in the background. So it's a vacuum system which is using virtually no water. The water is harvested and a vacuum system recirculates it around. The end result of this is that in terms of the BREEAM rating of 98.3, it is the most sustainable building of its kind so far developed. The links with aviation for me are very personal. I've been a pilot for something like 4 decades of my life, and I'm fascinated by the history of aviation, of space exploration. And I couldn't resist using this image because it's 1931, it's the Graf Zeppelin going over Cairo, the pyramids, and I just know that as one of several inspirations behind a project or competition to bring to life a fronton court, which is a vast kind of high-speed game, and that airship-like bubble which hovers over it, protects this area from the rain. So space in terms of lunar habitations is one of the projects where we work with the European Space Agency and other institutions to demonstrate the feasibility of combining three-dimensional printing in a lunar environment. And you can see the robotically controlled element in the foreground, and this cross-section is showing how that enclosure, where you're bringing the minimum amount of material to the moon and you're working with the local material, which is literally moon dust, which is regolith technically, and here you can see the robotic controlled robot in the foreground, which has mixed the regolith with a small amount of additive which has been shipped out. And the structure is very much inspired by the bone structure of animals and humans to create a crystalline element which is resistant to meteorites. And the closest that you can get to that on Earth is volcanic dust. And creating that in a vacuum, this is a working demonstration of something that has been demonstrated on Earth in a vacuum. So really,